facilitator for our webinar this afternoon. Really excited, thrilled to be here talking about this topic. It is one of my favorite topics to discuss, so I think we're going to have a lot of good conversation today. So thank you for taking the time to be here. I'm going to show you, hopefully, my webcam so you can see me. All right, hi, hoping everyone can see me, in addition to seeing my slideshow there. So I want to take a moment to just talk about logistics. For many of us, this might be our first webinar, so I want to make sure that you are comfortable with the format. If you have any questions, if you know what to do, we'll talk logistics before we get into the heart of our discussion. The first is that everyone is muted. I got some questions about why you're muted. We have a really large group today, which is fantastic. I think it really speaks to the need of the topic. But because we're such a large group, we need to mute everybody so that we don't get a lot of background noise, you know, office things, slamming doors, things like that. So I'll explain about how we're going to interact in just a moment. The second is if you are having any technical problems, I'm going to give you 2 numbers that you can reach out to. So if you're getting kicked off the webinar, if you can't see, you can't hear, we have our IT team standing by to help you. So grab a pencil, write it down. First number is 973-655-3015. Second number, 973-655-3890. So 973-655, either 3015 or 3890. So if you're having issues, you can give them a call because unfortunately I can't facilitate and also answer tech questions. There will be questions, I'm sure, about getting your certificate. At the end of the webinar, a little icon will pop up so that you can print your certificate directly today. In addition to that, everyone will get emailed a copy of their certificate and also the handouts. So if you're interested in getting more information on the PowerPoint, all of that will be sent to you in email sometime this week. So certificate, and that will be emailed directly to you. In addition, you can print the certificate today. So how can we interact today? I don't want this to be a one-sided thing. I love webinars because you get to reach a lot of people, but it also feels like I'm just talking to my computer screen. So I want to make sure you're out there and listening. So if you look on your GoToWebinar control panel, that little box that should kind of have your name and muted next to you, there is a box called questions. And in that is how we'll communicate. So I'll ask you questions, you can ask me questions. We have a really, really big number, so I may not be able to get to everybody's questions or discussion points every time, but I'm going to do my best. The second is you can only see your question. You cannot see the whole group's question. So don't be panicked if you're like, is it just me and Carly out there? Because there is a large group of us. I can see everybody. You can only see you. So let's test it out, see if we can make it work. So locate the question box, and what I would love is for some of you to write in what your role is working with young children. As you know, we're partnering with early intervention for this week, and I'm thinking there are a lot of early intervention providers out there, which is fantastic, but we also have people from a lot of different areas of early childhood. So if you want to take a second and just tell me a little bit about what your role is. Wow, so we've got some owners of child care centers, parent coordinators, executive directors, mental health coordinators, fantastic. Early Head Start, preschool teachers, lots of teachers, oh fantastic. Owners, law guardians, parents, great, I'm so happy we have parents out here too. Assistants, wow. Wow, so really a lot of OT, occupational therapy, speech therapy, Head Start, early Head Start, home child care providers. Fantastic. I love it. Great. Wow. So we have a lot of different areas that we're all working with children in, but that's great because no matter what your role is, I 100% guarantee you are encountering challenging behavior at some point, even if it's a parent. You'll hear my story today that as a parent, I encounter challenging behavior as much as I do professionally. So speaking of that, I'll just tell you a quick moment about who I am. Again, my name is Carly Aroldi. I am a clinician. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I am a play therapist, so I get to spend my days playing with kids. And I specialize in play therapy for children under the age of 8. So there's not a lot of people that really see children that young in a therapeutic setting. So I'm really excited to be connecting with all of you to kind of bring some of these ideas out there. I'm also a school counselor, and I'm a member of our CEFI team at Montclair State University. So the Center for Autism and Early Childhood Mental Health has a new initiative called the Socio-Emotional Formation Initiative, and our goal is to support emotional and social well-being for early childhood. And so you'll be hearing a lot more about CEFI, and I'll be talking about it a little bit later too, but I'm a member of what we call our CEFI squad. So you'll be able to hear more about that as we talk today. So I'm going to take my face out of your screen and go right to our PowerPoint so we can get into it. Hoping everybody can still hear me okay. If you can't, please give a shout out in the question box and we'll see what we can do. All right. So talking about this webinar, as I mentioned before, it is presented under the CEFI initiative at the Center for Education and Human Services at Montclair State. So, I'm sorry, Center for Autism and Early Childhood Mental Health. Part of the funding was provided by New Jersey Department of Human Services, and also we're in support of Grow New Jersey Kids. Please don't repeat this material without our permission. We're always happy to share all of our resources, but we ask that you don't repeat anything in its entirety without permission from the center. Anyone here who is a member of PINJ, that this webinar will be entered in a timely manner, and you will also, as I mentioned, get a certificate emailed to you. And for anyone applying for endorsement through the association, this webinar counts for 1.5 hours, and it is in the area of infant and very young child development and behavior. So we will be able to provide that information for you again if you miss it, but that is the area that it falls under theoretical foundations. Logistics are out of the way. Are we ready to talk challenging behavior? Let's get started. So I want you to check out this little guy. And I want you to think about the setting around him. So I want you to pretend you're in a preschool classroom doing some Mother's Day crafts, some Mother's Day activities, and doing handprints and finger painting and getting the kids all excited for Mother's Day and looking forward to sharing their creations with Mom. And then this little guy peeks his head up and looks at you and says, "I did it." And take a moment and think about the feelings that that evoked in you. So if this little guy looked up from his Mother's Day craft, said, "I did it," what feeling would get evoked in you? So take a second and write it in our little question box. How would you feel looking at that little guy? Wondering if you guys can still hear me because I'm not, oh, here we go. It's coming up. Excited, happy, awesome, innocence, optimism, happy, proud, oh, lots of proud. Ooh, some panic, excited, validated, accomplished, awesome. So a lot of really strong kind of positive feelings. Wow, so great. I love it. All right, erase that story from your head. And now I want you to think that you're in a preschool classroom and it is rest time. So all the kids got their little mats out, got their little towels out. You have a co-teacher in the classroom and you said, "I'm just going to step out for 1 second to grab a bottle of water. I'll be right back." Step out, grab your water. You're gone, you know, total of 90 seconds. You come back in, and here's this little guy. He had somehow gotten into the finger paints. He had somehow managed to get 6 colors on his hands in 90 seconds. And he looks up at you with this face and says, "I did it." Now think about what feelings are evoked. Frustrated, panicked, what else? Annoyed, oh my God, worried, a lot of frustrated. I'm not seeing any anger yet. I think I would probably come up with some anger. Tired, yes. Oops. Concern, familiar story. Disappointed, enraged, shocked. Yes, yes, a lot of frustrated. Surprised, okay, yeah. So there's a whole range of emotions that would accompany that experience too. And so I love telling this story because it helps validate that it's never about the behavior in isolation. We're always looking at that behavior in the context of everything else going around it. So the behavior itself doesn't change. The getting messy with finger prints, putting your hands up and saying, I did it, is the behavior. It's the context around you that is going to cause a feeling, and it's that context is why we label something challenging or not challenging. So it's not the behavior itself, it is what's going on around that behavior, which makes us feel a certain way, and then put the label on it of challenging. So that's kind of the context for our discussion today. So what are we going to do? We're going to talk a little bit about how brain development impacts behavior, identify where these behaviors are coming from and why, what's the root. Think about how your relationship to that child might be fueling the behavior. And then, of course, we're going to develop strategies to reduce and eliminate the behaviors. So I know that many of you may have come for some quick tips and quick tools, which we will absolutely get to. I really want to make sure that I give you some concrete stuff to go back to your children with. But at the same time, I want to emphasize that the foundation of understanding the roots of a challenging behavior is going to lead to the most helpful and effective strategy. So we can't just kind of pick strategies out of nowhere. We have to get to the root of what's going on. And my goal is for you to just pick up one or two things today that's going to shift how you are with the children in your care. Whether it's your personal care, your professional care, your therapeutic care, I'm hoping that there's a shift. I'm hoping that there's a way of being differently after we talk a little bit for a short time this afternoon. It kind of, our talk today is very aligned to the Brazelton Touchpoints model, so I wanted to just give a little shout out to Touchpoints, which is that I'm sure many of you are familiar with the work of T. Barry Brazelton and his creation of this Touchpoints model. And we're going to be offering through Cephi more trainings, and particularly in this model because we're a Touchpoints, Brazelton Touchpoints site. But the idea of a touch point is this predictable period of disorganization. So we know things are going to happen. They're going to cause disorganization and frustration, but that these moments are opportunities. They're opportunities not only to foster guidance in the child, but they're opportunities for parents and professionals to develop a deeper understanding and then have a mastery over what's happening. So we're very much aligned in what the Touchpoints model is looking at. So let's jump into our approaches. The talk is centered around approaches and then action strategies. And our first approach is something that feels really simple, but is not always easy. So simple, but not easy. And that's called a tune-in. So I love this quote from Dr. Becky Bailey, who created Conscious Discipline, which is, "It is from your peaceful mind that a peaceful world is created." The idea is if we want peace with our children, if we want peace in our classrooms, in our homes, in our settings where we work with kids, it needs to start with us. And this is really a paradigm shift in understanding kids. You know, we have this old understanding that is all about power and control and obedience and getting kids to really obey. And it's the idea that it's, yes, we want respect, and yes, that's important, but we're more interested in fostering resiliency, in developing a child's coping skills, and just creating healthy humans for the world. And to do this, we need to focus on the relationship with our kids, and we need to focus on a lot of the what we call non-cognitive skills too. Those ideas of how do we foster resiliency, how do we get them to develop grit. And I'm going back to it's the relationship. And in order to have an attuned, connected relationship to a child, it needs to start with you feeling at peace. So let's practice it. We are going to do what a tune-in is. So I want you to get really comfortable in your chairs. I want you to, if possible, place 2 feet on the ground and just sit. If it's comfortable for you, you can put your hand on your heart. And if it's comfortable, you can even close your eyes. And we are going to spend the next 30 seconds tuning in to how we're feeling and tuning in to our emotional state. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds of what I hope is silence. And as you're doing it, remember that it is possibly the only time of the entire day that you are going to have 30 seconds to yourself. So use it. And close your eyes, deep breath in, deep breath out. Deep breath in, deep breath out. Ten seconds to go. All right, if it's comfortable, open up your eyes. So I'd love to hear how that felt. You can take a moment and type in what that was like to just take 30 seconds to tune into yourself. Some relaxing, calming, peaceful. It was okay. An immediate burden felt lifted. Wow, that's powerful. Not long enough, I would agree. We could do this for the next hour and I'd be satisfied. Felt great tuning into myself. Yeah. Still had my mind racing? Sure. I love it. It's interesting that no one has yet said that it was difficult, because it can be really difficult to slow it down. It can be really difficult to take a moment and say, what am I feeling? That's the work sometimes. This idea that we are going, and it's really hard to slow it down. And the first step in any situation where you're going to be dealing with a challenge is to slow it down and connect to yourself. Because if you're feeling disconnected and frazzled, it's going to come out in your approach with a child. So why do we tune in? We tune in because our facial expressions, our tone of voice, our movements, and our gestures are more powerful than the words that you're saying. So if you're going into an interaction with a child and you're stressed and you're upset and you're anxious and you're mad and you're frustrated, it's going to affect the behavior of everyone in your classroom. And I have the word classroom in here a bit, but again, you can apply it anywhere. It's going to affect your connection to the individual child in your setting. It's going to affect anyone that you're with, but children are particularly affected by it because they don't have the language capability and the reflective capability that we have as adults. So if you take one thing, just one thing out of this hour and a half we have together, I'm hoping it is the tune-in. I'm hoping that you can take that 30 seconds in your car before you walk in to see a client, or that 30 seconds in your classroom before the kids come in, or that 30 seconds in your bed before you have to go grab a kid, and you can tune into yourself. So the idea is that if you tune into yourself, you'll be better able to connect and handle what's coming at you. It's a shift in your energy. So why do we tune in? We tune in because we want to avoid being that. Nobody wants that coming at them, especially a small child. That feels intimidating. That feels like yikes. That feels like someone that is out of control with themselves. And how are they supposed to have any control over the situation if they're out of control themselves? So the idea is that we want to become the person that we want others to be. And if we want our children to be self-regulated and calm and in control, then we need to practice and model the same thing. So what does an out-of-control adult do? They focus on what they don't want to happen. We hear a lot of, stop that, cut it out, don't do that. The out-of-control adult only sees behavior from their own point of view. You are driving me nuts. Why are you doing this to me? I'm having a bad day, cut it out. And they punish rather than they teach. So they say, go to timeout, and you don't deserve to have this toy, or give that back to so-and-so. It's always punishing, punishing, punishing. And you know, the pyramid model has this really great analogy, which is when children don't know how to do something, when they don't know math, we teach math. And when they don't know how to read, we teach them how to read. If children don't know how to behave, our instinct is to punish. And really, we need to teach them. We need to model it. So if we want kids to control themselves, we have to start and control ourselves. So in this vein of controlling ourselves, I want to tell you another little story. And this one centers on this little guy named Oliver, this adorable little man named Oliver. And I can say he is truly the most adorable child in the world. I'm not just saying that because he's my own. I'm saying that because it's my professional opinion, and I work with a lot of kids, so I can confirm it. But this is my little guy named Oliver, and in this picture, he's about 4 years old. He's 5 now, but in this picture, he had just turned 4 years old. And I'm going to tell you a little story about a challenging behavior moment with Oliver. So a little background on him. Oliver is a lover, not a fighter. He leans more towards anxious than aggressive. And right before this picture was taken, he had just started a new school. So he had never been in childcare before. It was his very first experience in a daycare childcare setting. He went to preschool. And so it was a really big transition for him. And 6 months beforehand, he had also welcomed a new sister. So a lot in his life had kind of gotten shaken up in a short amount of time. He got a new sister, we had also moved, and he started a new school for the first time. So it was the end of September of his preschool year, and my dad had come to visit. And so my dad said, I really want to take you guys out to lunch. So we'll pick Oliver up at noon, and let's go over to East Coast Burger, my favorite burger joint in Ridgewood, New Jersey. Shout out to East Coast Burger. And let's grab a burger when Oliver gets out of school. Said great. So I went to pick him up, and I could feel he was a little on the edge. He was a little bit more cranky, maybe tired, had a long day, but I thought, oh, we'll bring him to East Coast Burger, it'll be fun, he'll get some good lunch, and then he'll go home and we'll rest. He'll go home and take a nap afterwards. But I could feel there was definitely something off in him. We get to the burger place, it's really crowded, it's really noisy, there's kids everywhere, there's yelling, can't find a table, I'm trying to balance the baby and get french fries into the baby's face at the same time, telling him to be quiet and play with your trains and come on, mommy can't do that, trying to feed myself, trying to attune to my dad who's visiting for a short amount of time, and it just felt really chaotic in that moment. So I'm trying to just calm him down, like, you're fine, Oliver, just play with your train, you're good, you're good. And all of a sudden, he slaps me. Just straight across the face, slaps me. So that's the beginning of our Oliver story. And what I have to first do before anything else is I have to tune into myself. When that slap happens, it is really, really easy to just react immediately. But the first thing I had to do was put my hand on my heart and take a couple deep breaths, because I was panicked that I got slapped in front of my dad at East Coast Burger. So as we're talking today, and don't worry, we're going to have more to that story, I'm not going to leave you hanging, but as we're talking today, I want you to think a lot about a child of focus. So it might be a child that is in your care. If you're in a child care situation, it might be a child at your school or at your center. It might be, if you're working in EI, it might be an individual child that you're working with often, or it might be your own child. But think about that child and think about, as we're going through all the different approaches, what might be going on for that particular child. So, approach number 2 is to wonder why. I say this all the time to teachers, families, parents. Behavior is just communication. It's just a child's language. Or from the KBCM series, we say it's an observable expression of an unobservable process. It could be biological, psychological, or social. So we're just breaking it down to, why does a child do what they do? And a lot of parents already know this. When they hear their child or cry a certain way, it's, oh, that's their hungry cry, or that's their tired cry. Or they might be dropping their child off at childcare and say, you know what, mom's traveling a lot this week, so behavior might be a little bit off there. Or, you know, their best friend moved away, and so they've been a little bit off. But there are always reasons behind why a child's doing what they're doing, even if we can't figure them out easily. So some reasons are really obvious, and some are more subtle, and they take a lot of detective work to figure out what might be going on. But the thing to remember is that every behavior makes sense to that child, even if they can't articulate it and can't explain why. So parents will often say, well, I asked him why and he had no idea. They really might not be able to know why, but it's part of our job to hunt for it and to discover the reasons underneath the behavior. So like I had said, children often can't tell us what is bothering them, and they communicate it through their behavior. So I'm going to show you a series of pictures, and I want you to try and think about what this child might be telling us. Oh, actually, before I get to that, I want to ask a couple more questions. Sorry, I jumped ahead. So there are 3 main reasons why children use challenging behavior. The first is to obtain something, like an object, attention, something that they want. What am I trying to get, and how can my behavior potentially get me there? It might be to avoid something, like a person, a certain teacher, a certain other child, a group, an event. Maybe children just really don't want to be doing story time today, and so they're going to act out in any way they can to avoid their read aloud time. It also might be to change the level of stimulation around them. So think for a second about your child of focus, and if their behavior is looking to obtain something, if their behavior is looking to avoid or escape something, or if they're trying to change what's going on around them, change the level of stimulation. And so I mentioned before that we really need to be detectives. And if we're detectives, we need to ask a lot of questions. And we often say our information is only as good as the questions that we ask. So the number 1 question that I always throw out there whenever challenging behavior is happening is there something going on medically or in this child's health? And that includes sleep. So if you have noticed a pattern of challenging behavior with a child, is sleep a culprit? Is there something biological? Is eat a culprit? Is this happening around the same time? Does this always happen around the same activity? Is this happening with the same group of kids around them? Do we see the same things at home as we do at school? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but that's very telling as well. Is there any sort of pattern I can figure out? We talk about how long is it lasting? Also, how intense is this behavior? How long has it been happening? It's ever since we moved, ever since we started this school, ever since this child moved up to the toddler class, or ever since you moved into the pre-K class. Is this just a developmental stage? And is this child ready to learn? So these are really crucial questions that help us get to the root of what's going on. And they inform our strategy. So I often get called in to consult with different children about a lot of issues, but a huge one that always comes up is biting. What do we do with biters? I got a biter, I got this biter, what do we do with the biting? And it's really not a one-size-fits-all strategy, because if the root of the biting is in, 18-month-old getting molars in, then that little one might need a lot of oral stimulation. So they might need a teething ring. They might need something to help alleviate what they're feeling in their mouth. Or it could be a toddler who is looking to advocate for himself, express himself, but doesn't have the words. So we need to use the words to kind of keep the biting at bay. So it doesn't matter. Again, it goes back to me, the behavior is not what's important. It's what's underneath the behavior that the child's trying to communicate and express that makes the difference. And I'll take a second to pause here just to talk about the importance of having a team approach. I know it's really hard, especially in EI, where a lot of people are isolated, where you are doing work on your own, one-on-one with children, or you don't have a real team around you. So anywhere that you can pull in other voices, whether it's having a colleague go with you to a visit or whether it's having a discussion with the supervisor about what's going on, it's really helpful to have someone bounce this information around with so that you can talk it out. If you do happen to be in a setting like a childcare setting or a school setting, and you can ask another adult to come in and really look for what's going on with the behavior, that is really helpful as well, because sometimes when you're so close to it and you're in it, it's hard to kind of step back and see it clearly. So it's really important to have that team approach. So knowing that we're always looking for what's going on beneath or behind the behavior, I'm going to show you a couple pictures, and I want you to think about, in these pictures, what a child might be telling you through their look or through their behavior. So let's start with this little guy. You can take a second and type into our little question box, what might he be showing? Whoa, come back. Don't look ahead. Don't look ahead. There, stay. What might he be showing in the behavior? Shy, avoidant, embarrassed, tired. Yeah, I don't want to listen. It's too much. That's one of my favorites. It's too much right now. It's too much. Yeah, uncomfortable, unhappy, sad. Yeah, and I'm loving these answers because it shows that you're really thinking about, okay, what is the feeling underneath this behavior? An old school, an old paradigm approach, this would be, this is disrespectful, this is unacceptable, you need to meet people's eyes. But if we're looking at, what does this child need? They might need to be connected with differently. They might need to be doing something instead of what's put in front of them. That it shows more, a child doesn't have the capability to intentionally be disrespectful here. They're just showing you what they need through the behavior. Awesome. What about this little lady? What might be happening in her body and her brain? Upset, sad, hurt. Yeah, disappointed, jealous, possibly, yeah. Frustrated, missing somebody. I feel that, yeah, when I see that, I don't know why, you know, again, we're all making up stories because we're just seeing pictures, but something in me says she's missing somebody. Nobody wants to play with me. I don't want to do it. I'm missing my mommy. Did I just get yelled at? Yeah, what happened here? Absolutely. So it's not just about the tears or the face, it's about, what am I feeling? How about this guy? What kind of message do you, oh, he's mad, we think. Okay. Mine. I got a lot of mines in a row. It's like that little Nemo. Mine. I got this. Ooh, interesting. So I got two, I feel, opposite ones. One is like, I got this. Don't worry, I got this. And one is, I'm going to hurt you. So it's really interesting. Again, the picture, the behavior is the same. But are we feeling like he's saying, I can do this, I'm proud? Is he saying, I'm going to hurt you? So we don't know, right? Again, it's a picture taken completely out of context. But it's not about the behavior, it's about what's underneath the behavior. So is this a child that is really proud of himself, who's just about to make the basket and we're going to celebrate with him? Or is this a child that's feeling overwhelmed and frustrated and angry and doesn't know what to do, so he's looking to get your attention by throwing this basketball at you? So it's an opportunity to deepen. So that was fun. Thanks for playing those with me for a little bit. I love getting those responses. Let's go back to Oliver. So if you recall, we are in East Coast Burger. We are in a very chaotic setting with an overtired little 4-year-old, and he slapped me. So the idea is, what caused the slap? So first thing I did was tune in, take a moment to regulate myself so I can regulate him. And I want to find out what caused the slap. Keeping in the back of my head that he has recently transitioned to school. He is exhausted. He has been holding it together for 3 hours. He has been taken to a crowded place when he probably needed some downtime, right? He probably needed some moments of quiet, and I took him from a crowded, stressful preschool to an overcrowded, very stressful fast food restaurant. So he was probably looking for 2 things. He was definitely looking to change his level of stimulation. He was looking to not be so overstimulated. And he was also looking to gain my attention. So if I were to think about what's underneath this behavior, if I was really to wonder why and wonder what's going on, then I would think, okay, change the level of stimulation and gain my attention. So that takes us to our first approaches. And I got some questions in here about when we think about the child's emotion, no matter what it is, oh, I apologize for that. No matter what the emotion is, it's important to respect that emotion, and it's important to validate and empathize with it. And absolutely, we are going to get into that in the second half of what we're doing. So don't worry, just put a pin in that, and I guarantee you we're going to get back to it. So we're going to move on for a moment to the brain. And I don't want you to panic when you see a brain diagram. I used to kind of see these in trainings and be like, oh, brain stuff. I don't want to learn about brain stuff. But I promise you it's simple. I promise you it's easy. And I promise you it's going to change a lot of how you look at the behavior. So we're going to talk about the brain in the context of the triune brain, which is something that Dan Siegel kind of first introduced. And it's this idea that at any one moment, we can be in 3 different levels of our brain. I'm going to turn my webcam on, possibly. Let me know if you can see me. Somebody give a shout out if you can see me. Hopefully. Yes. Okay. Sorry. Getting situated with my technology here. Nope. All right. Can you see me now? Yes, possibly. Yes. Perfect. Okay, good. Okay, so let me get back to the slide I want to be on. Hold on one second. So the idea is when we are in any sort of situation, we're in one of our 3 brain states. And they range from the bottom of your brain. So hold your hand up like this. I'm going to believe that you're doing it with me. And this part of your body, or your brain would be, or part of your body would be your spinal cord. And the idea is that all of the inputs from your body and your senses are coming into this lower part of your brain as your brainstem. And I have this labeled here. This is a great diagram from Carrie Conti called Parenting the Brain. And she created this visual that I love, but it's this idea that the bottom part of your brain is what we call the reptilian part of your brain. And that is where all of your base instincts are housed. So that's where your metabolism is regulated, your respiration is regulated, your fight or flight responses, they're all housed right here in the bottom of your brain, your reptilian part of your brain. So if a child is acting out of that part of their brain, that's when they're kicking and biting and screaming and hitting, shutting down, running away. That's when they're really acting out of this base reptilian piece of their brain. Moving up a level into your limbic system. So that's your emotional center of your brain. And that's, again, where all your feelings are housed. That's where your memories are stored. If you tuck your thumb in here, if you're doing it with me, that's your amygdala. And that's all deeply connected here in that limbic center of your brain. So if a child is acting out of their limbic center, they might be kind of whiny, they might be kind of cuddly, they might be speeding up a lot, they might have nervous laughter, they might be crying, playing baby. Those are all behaviors we see when a child is in, sorry, lost you again. Those are the behaviors we get when a child is in their limbic piece of their brain. So again, children fluctuate between these two areas a lot. And then there's the third piece of the brain, and that's if this is how your brain kind of sits in your head, and that comes right behind your forehead. That's the neocortex. So I call that your human part of your brain. And that's where if children are talking and listening and playing, creating, reasoning, they're all hanging out in their human part of the brain. So at any moment, you're in one of these three pieces of your brain. And this applies to children and it applies to adults. And so we often have to think about what part of the brain are we in. So I love to tell the story to kind of really get you to think about what it feels like to be in different levels of your brain. So let's pretend you're driving down the Garden State Parkway, a road I'm very familiar with, and you know, you're in the middle lane doing 75, people are flying by you doing 80, but you're feeling good here. And maybe your partner's in the next seat next to you, maybe kids are in the back seat. And so you're in the very human part of your brain. You're feeling good, you're feeling connected, you're feeling rational. All of a sudden, someone cuts you off. So your body floods, and you know this feeling viscerally. Your body floods with cortisol, it floods with adrenaline, and we say you flip your lid. You go from being very human to into your reptile part of your brain because you're feeling threatened, because you're feeling something is threatening my safety and my family's safety. And so you immediately flood with those hormones and boom, go to here. And then you act in very reptilian ways. You might scream, you might flip them off, you might curse New Jersey, as I often do. And so you're feeling like triggered, and you're feeling that you need to protect yourself. So let's pretend you have your partner next to you. And let's say your partner starts yelling too and says things like, I told you not to take the parkway, and you always drive too fast. We should have left early, because if we had left early, you wouldn't have felt this. All of a sudden, your feelings of being triggered are now being amplified because first you had a threat coming in front of you, and now you have a threat coming next to you. Because your brain is not in a place to process reasoning and logic, you're only having the emotion of it. So your brain has felt threat, and you're much more likely to stay down here and probably fight back, because that's what your instinct is telling you to do, that's what your brain is telling you to do. However, if you have a partner who attunes to themselves first, regulates themselves first, and then maybe puts a hand on your shoulder, maybe takes a deep breath, and says, wow, that was really, really scary. Are you okay? Kids, are you okay? Okay, everybody's okay. Everybody's feeling okay. You are much more likely to go from a reptilian part of your brain back into the human part of your brain, and back into a place where you can be logical and where you can be reasoning and you can have a conversation. So that's a really great example of how this feels like as an adult. And children tend to fluctuate between here in the limbic and the reptile much more often than adults do. So they're doing this in their body all the time. And often the challenging behaviors that we find the most frustrating are coming from this reptilian place. So the spitting and the screaming and the hitting and the running away, that's coming from a really reptilian place. And if we try and address it humanly, if we try and address it with logic and reasoning and things of that nature, it's not going to sink in because the child's not in the part of their brain to take that in. So they need calm, and they need connection, and they need comfort, so that then they can get back to their human. So you can see in this great diagram from Carrie Conti, is that when a child's in that piece of the brain, we are calm with them, we connect with them, we comfort them. Oh, okay. I just found out you guys can't see my desktop. Hold on. I'm going to take me off webcam. So, can you see that now? Give me a shout out, yes or no? Oh, hold on. Sorry. Stinking technology. How's that? Got it. Yes, I'm back. Okay. Glad everybody can see it. All right, you don't need to see me anymore, but you can see the PowerPoint. So, awesome, thanks. So, again, if a child is in that reptile piece of their brain, they need calm, they need connection, they need comfort. If they're in that mammalian, that limbic part of their brain, they might need you to get really playful. They might need you to get reflective with them. They might also need connection. But it's only when children are in the human part of their brain that they can really get the lessons, and you can really inform, and you can really guide, and you can really teach. Because if you don't, if a child's in that reptile place, they're not able to take it in. So I hope that makes sense. I hope it wasn't too confusing with the brain stuff. So we'll go from there. So going into Oliver again, I had to kind of wonder what part of the brain he was in. And from the slap, I would very much determine that he was being a little reptile, because I know a human-based Oliver would never slap his mom, and particularly never slap his mom in a public place in front of Grandpa. So I had to remind myself he is in a reptilian piece of his brain. So moving on to approach number 4. We want to reframe the behavior. So many times we look at behavior in terms of what it's doing to us, or what it's stopping us from doing, or why it's a problem for us. So the problem is, oh, he whines from the moment he gets here until the moment he gets home. And if we think about that differently, we might need to say he really misses his family, and we need to help him build his relationships at school. So we move from what the problem is, oh, this constant whining, I can't take it, it's so frustrating, to what can I do? I can help him build relationships to alleviate some of those feelings and make him feel more comfortable at school. The other idea is she always knocks over what other children have built with the blocks. And it's the idea of she may want to play but not know how to ask. So we need to be able to give her the language that she needs. So we're focusing again on what is this behavior communicating, rather than on personalizing it or gathering frustration. So we're starting to empathize. Neil made a great comment there. We're moving to empathize and looking at this child's perspective. So thinking about, again, that child of focus, is there a way that you can reframe what they're doing? Even if it's really upsetting to you, even if it's really triggering to you, can you reframe it into what this child is trying to get across through using his or her best way, which is their behavior? And so moving on to Oliver, reframing his behavior. Rather than saying, oh my God, my kid just slapped me, I'm going to lose it. Tuning in. I always start there. I always start with that deep breath and that tune in. And telling myself he has completely lost his ability to regulate himself. He has completely lost his ability to get back on track, so he needs my help with that. That's the reframe. So it's really easy to reframe when we're sitting here all in our human parts of our brain thinking logically about behavior. It's much harder to do in the moment when we are triggered ourselves, when a behavior moves us from our human brain into our reptilian brain. So let's think about what your triggers are. Think about 3 behaviors that really get you, really get your mind, really get your body. What are 3 behaviors that really get you? And you can write them in the responses. Spitting. See a lot of spitting. Arguing, biting, spitting, throwing toys. Yes, ignoring, calling my name every second. I feel that deeply. Lying, defiance. When they raise their tone of voice, constantly following you, running out of the classroom. Yep. This is a great example. Going limp and falling on the floor. I don't love when children go limp, but when a child does do that, it just tells me they, again, have lost their ability to regulate themselves, and they are so reptile, they can't even stand. They're just a little snake. That's what, when kids go totally limp, that's what that tells me. Sassing, spitting, yes. Yes, rolling on the floor. Yeah. Laughing when they're being corrected. Yeah, nice. So where did I go here? So the idea is that when you have that triggering behavior, and we all have them, mine happens to be whining because I'm projecting all sorts of ideas onto what that whining is, that we need to think about, why is this particular behavior triggering me? What am I bringing to the interaction when this behavior happens? What do I want to teach this child instead? And how do I want to teach it? So I said before, I can handle tantrums. I am so good at tantrums. I love them because I just feel really empathetic and can really validate. But a constant whine puts me in my reptile brain to the point where I just want to scream. So I have to be really careful around that behavior. I have to be really careful. And I like to talk about, you want to be the thermostat and not the thermometer. You want to set the tone for this interaction, set the temperature for it, and not just be totally reactive to what the child is bringing to you. So again, going back to your child of focus, why does this particular behavior trigger you? And what do you bring to those interactions? And yeah, I'm getting some good comments too, that it's not about controlling the behavior. It's not about controlling the tantrum. It's about self-regulation and controlling yourself so that when you then enter into your interaction with the child, it feels more empathetic and it feels more validating to them. So what are you bringing to interactions when you're getting triggered? So going back to our slap story. I got slapped. Obviously that's a trigger. It is a trigger to get slapped by your own child. I don't care who would argue that with me. And so what did I feel? I was embarrassed. And I was embarrassed that it happened in public, and I was particularly embarrassed because it happened in front of my dad. And I don't think I mentioned this before, but my dad is a retired state trooper. So just the idea of looking at him in a disrespectful way when I was young, let alone slapping, it would have been unheard of. So the fact that this happened in that context of that relationship, yeah, it was very triggering and embarrassing. I want to talk about, what am I bringing to the interaction? And in that moment, I was really angered, and my personal feelings were hurt, and I was enraged in a way. And so I had to remember, that's not taking him into consideration. That was taking myself into consideration. So I had to go back to his point of view. What do I want to teach? I want to teach that it's okay to be angry and okay to be upset, but that it's not okay to hurt me. And how do I want to teach it? I want to teach it calmly. I want to teach it with love. So let's pause there for a second. You'll notice that these are the approaches we're bringing to the challenging behavior. And we haven't even interacted with the child yet. We've done things like tune in. We've done things like, oh, sorry, no, I keep doing that. Wondering why. We've figured out what this child's brain state is like. We reframed the behavior, and we're responding and not reacting. So those are kind of the core approaches that we want to take, and we've done this even before we've interacted with the child. So these are the things we're doing before we interact with the child. So I'm going to take a moment, and if there is something that has resonated with you so far, if there's something that makes you think a little bit more, I'd love for you to type it in. And I may not be able to, again, get to every question, but I just want to take a pause because we've kind of gone through the approaches section before we get into the action, so I want to hear what you're feeling. Yeah, it's just, I love this response too. We're talking not only about self-regulation, but co-regulation. So that in order, and we'll talk more about co-regulation in a little bit, but it's that idea that in order to regulate a child, we also need to regulate ourselves. And through our relationship, we help that child to regulate. So we're going to actually get more into that in a moment. This is a really big statement, and I appreciate the respondent who said, this is really hard when I was raised so differently. And I would say amen to that, because not many of us were raised in this way. So this is the work, right? This is the idea that when this isn't how we had a model, when this wasn't what was put in front of us, it's really hard to bring that to our work now. both personally and professionally. So I'm with you there. It's not how I was raised either, and so it can really be a hard bar to jump over. You appreciate responding and not reacting. Great. It's interesting that these steps have all happened before any interaction occurs. I know, and that's why the work is even before you even interact with this child. So nice. Okay. Great. Some really good responses. I love some of these ideas that you guys are putting out there and making me think too. So we're going to move on a little bit to our action strategies. And there's 4 that I'm going to put out to you, which is focusing on the front end, connecting before you redirect, ACT limit setting, and mindfulness and breath regulation. So those are the ones we're going to go over. I'm just going to get my screen situated. Hold on. Okay. So the first concept on focusing on the front end is building and nurturing relationships. It all comes from your relationship with that child. So I want you to take a second and I want you to really think about that child that triggers you, that child of focus that we've been talking about. And I want you to think about a time you spent together. I want you to think about, do you know how many siblings that child has? Do you know their favorite book, their favorite thing to do on the playground, their favorite snack? What is your view of that child? Because he or she is going to conform to whatever view you have of them. And I really like to say kids don't learn from someone they don't like. So it comes down to the foundation is the relationship. And if we don't have a respectful, caring, even loving relationship with a child, then it's going to be really hard to address any challenging behavior that comes afterwards. So think about a time that you spent with your child of focus. And I know so many of you are doing this already, but these are just things we need to remind ourselves, especially when things get challenging. We sometimes throw out this because we think it's not making a difference, when I'm telling you this is the meat, this is the stuff that makes a difference. So it's greeting each child in the morning by name. Using a child's name is crucial, especially in a positive light. Hey, Michael, I'm so glad that you're here today. Talking about the child's family, discovering what they like, telling the child that you think about them when they're not there. I was in a daycare center recently, and it was a 4-year-old class, and the teacher had said something like, oh, James, we missed you yesterday. And his face just lit up. Like, you thought about me when I wasn't here. I'm so important to this class that you thought about me. Wow, that's big. Share pieces of yourself. Children, often sometimes childcare providers or teachers can feel like this presence that's far away, and when you share parts of yourself, that can be some of the most meaningful to them. Assigning responsibilities. Using gentle and affectionate touch. We could have talk for a whole 3 hours about touch in relationships, but we are so afraid to touch children, and they need it so badly that that's something I really, when I'm working with a daycare center, childcare center, I like to look at their policies regarding touch, because that really informs a lot of what happens with a child. Creating a special signal with them. So these are all ways that you can start to build some of that positive relationship. So someone asked the question, what do I mean share yourself? Talk about your own life. Talk about, oh, I had a really rough Saturday because it was rainy all day, and Saturday really makes me cranky, so I had a hard time getting out of bed. Talking about what things are like for you. Talking about when you're having a hard time, modeling when you're feeling frustrated. We always say that we want to model what we want to see. So we are adults, and we get frustrated and we get angry, and it's okay to show those emotions. And if we show a coping skill with that emotion, that is really, really powerful. And I want to bring up another point another participant said, which is you want to be authentic and not patronizing. You want to be really genuinely interested in what's going on with this child, and not just asking real questions to check them off the list. That kids know the difference. They can smell it out, right? They know if you are messing with them or if you're just asking questions to check it off. So The idea is that we're focusing on the front end and building that positive relationship. Another piece of that is to catch the behavior early. And I say that because children often show a lot of signs before it gets to the challenging behavior. So for example, anxiety often comes before challenging behavior. If you have a really anxious kid, that might come off in withdrawal, but it might also come off in aggression. So can we sense, can we attune to what the child is feeling before we jump into addressing their challenging behavior? So going back to the example with Oliver, I mentioned that he is more of an anxious kid. So it was really important for him to have some quiet time as he entered the classroom. And I quickly found out that having 15 kids rush into the classroom at 9 a.m. was not a great way for him to start his day. So even though I didn't need it, I was able to sign him up for a little kind of before care for 15 minutes. It was 15 minutes that he was then able to transition into the room quietly, do a puzzle, do something that he could color, and that was all he needed in order to get more comfortable in the day. So can we be flexible with our children? Can we meet them where they're at? And if you have a child that has a really rough transition, can they come 5-10 minutes before the doors open to have that downtime? And they may not need it the whole 6 months. They may need it for 3 weeks, and we're meeting the child where they are and giving them what they need. They might need some extra teacher time. They might need some extra reading, some extra playing. They might need to have a break in the classroom, and not a punitive break, not a, hey, you don't deserve to classroom, get out, but hey, I need a little break from all these little bodies around me, so I'm going to get to go have snack with director. I'm going to go have snack with somebody in a special room. And again, I propose that not in a punitive way, but in a way where we're meeting the child's needs. So some people get resistant when I talk about focusing on the front end, because they talk about all of the extra energy they have to put into meeting the child in these spaces. But my response to that is often, kids are going to take your energy one way or the other. They're going to take it on the front end, or they're going to take it on the back end. So I think it's much more helpful for everyone involved to put our energy in these kind of frontal spaces so that it doesn't get to the point where it feels really challenging. All right. So for those of us that are in classroom settings or group settings, the environment, I think this is also a concept that kind of comes out of the pyramid model, which is that the environment is the second or third teacher. That if you want a peaceful classroom, you really need to think about your environmental setup. And that's not totally the focus of our talk today, but it's a huge piece of it. And I'm sure in the future we'll be offering more webinars just on setting up classrooms that are conducive to social and emotional well-being. Adam, write that down. So the idea is that we want to create a caring community. We want to really focus on the physical setup of space. Do we have huge areas where kids are getting into fights all the time, and so we have to kind of partition this off a little bit more? Accentuating the positive. This goes for everyone. Another one of my favorite phrases from Carrie Conti is, what you appreciate appreciates. So if you are focusing and appreciating constantly on things that are not going well in the classroom, you're going to get and see more of that. If you are appreciating things that are going well and things that are flowing and things that feel good, you are going to get more of that too. So what you are appreciating appreciates. Even, this morning I have 2 little ones, and they got out of the house so beautifully this morning, which doesn't happen all the time. So we had major celebrations in the car. I can't believe these 2 kids got out of the house so beautifully. And on days where it doesn't happen like that, I don't focus on it. I know that it's going to be okay again, and I don't drag it out in the car like, you guys need to have more listening, you guys need to have more of this, because that is giving so much energy to what you don't want to see that it starts to create it more and more. Having clear rules, clear routines, clear rituals and transitions is huge. Labeling emotions, providing outlets, and providing choices. We're going to get more into choices in a moment. So for Oliver, focusing on the front end. If I had been thinking about focusing on the front end, I probably would have had lunch at home. And that may have been disappointing to myself, that may have been disappointing to the other adults, but it may have really been what he needed in that moment. And we could have had a rest and gone there for dinner. We could have sent my dad out for takeout. There could have been different options. But when we get so focused on what we want as the adult and what we think should be happening and how kids should be behaving, that's when we get caught up in creating a mess in behavior. And pardon my language, but in therapy we have this term, which is people tend to be shoulding all over themselves, meaning you're shoulding, when that's not reality. When reality is, this is where I am, and this is what I would like to have to happen. So for Oliver, focusing on the front end would have meant having lunch at home. Oh, I love that someone made a great point that besides the classroom, they use this in the playroom where they're babysitting their 6 grandchildren. First of all, God bless, 6 grandchildren, 5 years and younger. Amazing. So you're thinking about the physical setup of your playroom. It's not just a free-for-all with, toys left, right, center. It's a real conscious idea of how am I setting up the environment so that the child is feeling calm and also feeling that they have some ability to choose what they're doing and have space to themselves. Awesome. So our second action strategy is connecting before redirecting. And this comes down to 2 key points, which are eyes and emotions. So if a child's having a challenging moment and showing some sort of challenging behavior, we want to attune to them not only emotionally, but also physically. We need to be where the child is. So we, had a lot of talk in recent years about get on the eye level, get on eye level. But I propose even getting below eye level, because if you think about in nature, when 2 kind of predators meet each other eye to eye, that's a really threatening stance. So it's even more important that you get under eye level and you're communicating to that child's brain, possibly to their reptilian brain, I'm coming in peace. I am not a threat. I'm here to say, I'm here to provide help. And sometimes that means getting on the floor, right? Sometimes that means getting, you can't go through the floor, but getting as close as you can to where the child needs to be able to see you. And so you're not only tuning physically, but you're thinking of their emotional state. So what is this child feeling? Are they angry? Are they sad? Are they scared? Are they ashamed? And we want to connect to that and really validate it, because I often say it's not about feeling better right away. It's getting better at feeling. It's that idea of I can be angry and I can be sad and I can hold that feeling and I don't have to numb it out. I don't have to escape it. I don't have to show any sort of it doesn't have to be a negative thing. I can hold that feeling and still be in control of my behavior and my body. That's what we learn through years of practice as adults. And some of us are still working on it and practicing it, and that's the work of it. So when we connect to the child's brain, it helps them to make better decisions. It really, really bothers me when I'm in a store and I hear a parent calling out to a child from 2 aisles down, or when they're down the aisle and they see a child pick up something they don't want them to touch. And I just want to say it would be so much more meaningful if you came into their space. So when we're screaming from across the hall or we're screaming from down the stairs, come down, it's time for bath time, let's go, let's go. That does not have as much power as walking up the stairs and meeting a child where they are so that you can physically and emotionally attune to them before you're making a request. And that's another piece of it, that you need to attune before you make request a child to do something. So I make the comparison to mounting a moving horse. If children are really deep in play, especially a child that has a rough time with transitions, you might need to really attune and jump on that moving horse with them before redirecting them. So it might be, oh, you're having so much fun with this, but now we have to move on to this. So do you want to slither like a snake over there, or do you want to bounce like a bunny over there? It's giving them options. It's making it playful. So it's not like, okay, there was your playtime, and now we're getting serious. You can use play in your transitions as much as you can in the work as well. I want to just say a quick moment about timeouts here too. There's a lot of talk about timeouts, about whether or not that is a useful strategy. My experience has been that when children are behaving the worst is when they need us the most. So when we isolate children, when we tell them that they need to regulate themselves and control themselves by putting them in timeouts, that's not really giving them the guidance and support they need to better manage or regulate their behavior. So it's true that children will often have a timeout and pull themselves back together, but that's usually because they've exhausted themselves and not regulated themselves. So I know that children need you when they're acting in unsavory ways. So I think it's much more productive and much more helpful to the development of a child's brain and coping skills to connect with them in those moments than it is to isolate them. Okay, so back to our little friend here, Oliver. So connecting before redirecting. Slap happened. I didn't focus on the front end, which is why we're in this moment now, but I knew I had to connect with him before redirecting what was going on. So in that moment, and again, this all comes from the tune in. I tuned in, I got below his eye level, and I said, we're having a tough moment. Let's walk over here together. Because I wanted to take him away from the situation. It wasn't a, get out of here, you go stand in the corner. It was, I'm going to come with you away from this chaos so we can take a moment to decompress together. And I connected with him below his eye level with a deep breath, reflecting his feeling. You're feeling really angry right now, before I redirected him away from the situation. Really great question, which is, what advice would you give if we need to take a timeout due to a triggering behavior? Absolutely. Timeouts, I think, for a parent or for a child care provider or for an adult are important. And so I'm not saying you don't ever get space from that behavior. If you're getting triggered and you are in your emotional or your reptilian brain, and you need a moment to regulate yourself and get yourself back human, 100% do it. Take the space, take the time, because you don't want to be reacting out of one of those lower brain states. You want to be really human when you're addressing this challenging behavior. So yes, thank you for bringing that up. And if you are using a timeout so you can get space for yourself, do that. But I would also be really verbal in that, like, I need a moment. I'm just going to need a moment where I put my hand on my heart and I step away for a second and I back away. So I wouldn't phrase it as, you need to leave because mommy's going to start yelling. I would phrase it as, I need a moment to get myself feeling okay before we talk again. So again, you want to do that age appropriately and also setting appropriately. You obviously can't walk out of a childcare classroom to center yourself if you have 20 little ones on the floor. But you can take a deep breath. You can steady yourself. You can do everything and still be physically present, but emotionally recollect yourself. So that's about connecting before redirecting. All right, moving on to ACT limit setting. So this is a really powerful way to set limits that is empathetic and also validating. So Gary Landreth is basically the grandfather of play therapy and wrote a lot about child-centered play therapy and kind of created the theory as we practice it now. But he created this theory that we apply in play therapy situations all the time, but we can also apply it to outside the playroom as well. So if you have a child acting in a way that you want to address, the very first piece is to acknowledge what the child is feeling and acknowledge what the child is desiring. So if they're throwing sand up into the sandbox and it's just getting all over all the other kids or getting all over you, or you just want to keep the sand in the box, the first thing is you acknowledge what they're doing or wanting. You really love throwing that sand in the air. You really love that. You're having so much fun with that. You're joining them. You're joining them in that moment. That's the A, acknowledge. This, come back, sorry. Yeah. The C is communicating what the limit is, but sand stays in the box. And the limit is really concise. It's really just a very short and clear statement, and it's not emotionally driven. It is, sand stays in the box. It's not said with anger, it's not said with frustration, it's said authentically. And then, that's the C, communicate the limit, and I always say 10 words or less, you gotta say in 10 words or less. And the T is to target alternatives. You can throw leaves in the air, or you can scoop sand in the truck. So it's letting that child take their energy into something else, especially in toddlerhood, especially in preschoolhood. Children have a really difficult time just stopping the behavior with no other outlet. So it's really important that we give them an outlet to direct that energy. So that T is to target alternatives. You really love throwing sand in the air, but sand stays in the box. You can throw leaves in the air, or you can scoop sand in the truck. Simple, precise, and the biggest piece of this is that you are not emotional in the moment. You are not feeding it with your own frustration, anger, or emotional energy. A lot of times I'm getting some questions will be, well, what if they keep throwing the sand? What if they keep throwing the sand? And absolutely, you're not going to get every kid that's like, oh, thank you for reflecting me. I'm going to change my behavior now. You're going to get more and more challenges. The key there, number one, stick with the tune-in. Stick with keeping yourself centered. Keep with keeping yourself grounded. And then you might need to change the choices. I see that you really love throwing sand in the air, but sand stays in the box. You can choose to do this. You can choose to, throw leaves in the air, or you can choose for the sandbox to go away for the day. So you change the choices depending on the behavior. Thinking that makes sense. And that, like I said, ACT limit setting can be really, really powerful. So it's something that I'm hoping that you can start to apply, because it's about reflecting the emotion, setting the limit, and giving them alternatives. All right, so with Oliver, what did ACT limit setting look like in that moment? You are really mad and you want to hit mommy right now, reflecting his feeling and reflecting his desire. But mommy is not for hitting. Really clear, really unemotional, and just concise. You can bang on the wall, or I can give you a tight squeeze. And in that moment, we go back to the importance of wondering why. Why was this behavior happening? And it wasn't that he needed it wasn't that he needed the sensory input of banging. It wasn't that he needed something to hit, as maybe a younger child would. He needed my engagement and he needed my attention. So he chose the tight squeeze or the hug. So you're really mad at mommy right now, but mommy is not for hitting. You can bang the wall, or I can give you a tight squeeze. ACT limit setting. All right, and our final strategy, mindfulness and breath regulation. I love this quote, that if every 8-year-old in the world is taught meditation, we will eliminate violence from the world within 1 generation. So it's this concept that we want, just the way we did in the beginning of our time together, where we took 30 seconds to check in with ourselves. We took 30 seconds to figure out what we were feeling. We took 30 seconds to regulate ourselves. That's the same thing we want to teach kids. That's the same thing that we want to show them, that they can start learning to self-regulate. They're going to start by doing it through you. That's co-regulation. They're going to start by plugging into you to regulate yourself, and then regulate themselves, and then they're going to start doing it on their own. So there's so many ways you can go with this. There's listening mindfulness, there's eating mindfulness. It's basically coming to our senses and becoming aware of our senses. There's a great curriculum called the Mind Up curriculum, which talks a lot about incorporating mindfulness as young as, I think it starts in pre-K. It starts in like 3s and 4s. So that's a great resource to look at if it's a topic you're interested in. But it's something you can do in the whole classroom. It's something you can do in your home, and especially with EI providers, it's something you can do to start your sessions. If this is part of your routine, everyone's going to come through, or everyone's going to be connected and be calm, jumping into the work that you need to do with them. So the first is the star breath. And it might be, if you have a kid that has a lot of different challenges, you might ask them to lead the class. You might ask them to model it. So let's all smile. Let's take a deep breath and relax. Smile, take a deep breath, and relax. My personal favorite is pizza breath. So you have the child hold up their hand and you ask them to really visualize and think about what is your favorite kind of pizza? What kind of pizza do you just love the most? Pepperoni, that sounds so delicious. Okay, I want you to put the piece of pizza under your chin, and they hold their hand under their chin. And you say, now breathe in and smell how delicious that pizza is. Smell the gooey, yummy cheesiness. Oh my gosh, it's so delicious, but it's too hot. So blow on it, blow out. Blow through your mouth. Breathe in. Smell the gooey deliciousness, breathe out, cool it off. So it might be 10 pizza breaths. It might be a kid creating their own. In my practice, I have kids create, I teach them a bunch of different kinds of breathing, and then they create their own, and that's always the most powerful. There's birthday candles where you hold out your hand and you ask them to blow hard, to put each finger down, to blow out their birthday candles. So those are just some ideas of how to incorporate this idea of breath regulation and mindfulness. So with Oliver, he is crazy Star Wars obsessed, like crazy, like I'm concerned he's going to become a Jedi. So we talk a lot about Darth Vader breaths, where he breathes in like Darth Vader and breathes out like Darth Vader. I wish he was here, I'd have him model it for you. But that is his way of bringing attention to his body and his lungs and helping to move him from his reptile part of his brain to his human part of the brain. So those are the action strategies that we talked about. So we're going to review it again, but I just want you to take a second to pause and think about, in this story situation with Oliver in the slap, what if I had taken that old paradigm, traditional approach to discipline? What if I had immediately sent him to the car in a timeout and you're not able to come back into the restaurant until you pull yourself together? What is that teaching him? How is that guiding him? It's that idea of, if he could hold himself together, we wouldn't have been in the situation to begin with. So the root of the word discipline is to teach and not to punish. We're not looking to just give consequences. We're looking to guide and to shift how a child can learn to cope and develop that resiliency. And it's a lot. I've thrown so much information at you this afternoon. I don't want you to get overwhelmed by it. But I want you to remember that it's small shifts. If it's one little thing that you do, it's one little moment that you interact a little bit differently. If you tune in, the next time that behavior triggers you, if instead of reacting in that moment, you take 5 seconds and take a couple deep breaths, that's going to shift things. It's those like microscopic moments that is where the big change happens. So you don't have to remember everything out of today. You don't have to overwhelm your head, but those little moments. So our take-home messages are, how you are is as important as what you do. Behavior is communication, and children regulate through their relationships with you. And that's personal, that's professional, that's childcare, it's everywhere. So I'm going to stick around for another minute or two to hopefully get to a couple of questions. I know we're coming right up on time, but I do want to give you guys a moment. But just to reflect back on our approaches to tune in, to wonder why, talk to the brain, reframe the behavior, respond, don't react, and then your strategies. Focus on the front end, connect before you redirect, your ACT limit setting, and mindfulness. You will see in your little GoToWebinar box that you can download your certificate right now. Yay, technology. But as I mentioned, it will also be emailed to you. So you can download it right now or upload it, and then you can print it out. But it will also be emailed to you within the week. So you'll be able to have that along with the handouts. I know many people are asking for copies of the PowerPoint and the slides, that you will be able to get the handouts out there too, and also a recording of the session. So if you just want to make sure that your fellow teachers listen to this, or your spouse might want to listen to this, these are all good things to think about as you are able to listen to it again, listen to it with a coworker, listen to it with a spouse. here are some of the references, and we know that a lot of what I'm talking about is coming from the whole brain child, no drama discipline, and Neil made a great point. It's neurodevelopmental evidence-based information. This isn't, you know, oh, we just think this is what's happening. This is evidence-based information on what's going on in children's brains, and how it's affecting their behavior. So those are some references which we'll have too. I talked about the certificate. I mentioned PING earlier. Here's information again on our center, what the Center for Autism and Early Childhood Mental Health provides. Hoping that you all have had a moment to reach out, look at our website. And then upcoming webinars we have on May, Partnering with Parents. In June, social emotional development through the lens of the IDERS, ECHRS, and FCCERS. I'm not going to say it out loud because it's a professional platform. And then June, the use of play to promote healthy attachment. So that's all I have for you today. I'd be happy to stick around and answer a couple of questions, but if you need to jump off, jump off. Thank you for your participation. Grab your certificate, and I hope we connect soon. So let me just scroll through because I saw a couple of really good questions in here that I wanted to just make sure that we address. So I love this one, what happens if a child goes from 0 to 60 in a flat second, meaning that their coping skills are so depleted possibly that they can't even cope with what's in the moment. I would really look at that, and I might try and backtrack it, because even though it might feel that they go from 0 to 60, I'm wondering what the seeds are that may have set them up for that. So this is where it's really helpful if you have another adult, or you can do a team approach. I don't know if you're in a classroom setting or what your setting might be, but or if you're EI, you're working individually with the child. I have a feeling it may have been things that have been building throughout the day, or moments that have been happening very subtly, very, very subtly, that feel like it's all of a sudden going from 0 to 60. But my guess would be that there have been things that have built up for the child, and we may not see it as an adult all the time because it may take some really deep detective work, but my gut would say something's building before it gets to that moment. So I would really wonder about that and really look at that, and then see what can we do before that overwhelm. This might be a child that looks like they're really holding it together, but they're struggling so hard that you just put that last straw and it's done. So what's happening before that eruption? I like that people said that they can use this with their spouses. I agree. My husband would agree. Again, the PowerPoint, you will be getting you'll be getting handouts emailed to you, so this information will be coming to your email as well. There was one more I want to get to, so give me one more second. There's one other question I wanted to, yeah, so it's again just the idea that we want to be really authentic in our interactions with children, and I think that's part of what the discussion is about, that it is coming from our genuine selves and connecting with this child rather than worrying about what the obedience or power dynamic looks like. What is authentic in me connecting to authentically in that child? And it's through that relationship, through that connection, is what is going to build on fostering coping skills and eliminating some of these challenging behaviors. So I see that we are right up on 1:30. I could talk for the next 6 hours, but I'm told I need to wrap up our webinar before it kicks me off. So I want to thank everyone again for being here. Thank you for your really beautiful feedback, questions, participation. I love how thoughtful our group was today, and I'm really looking forward to connecting again soon. Hope you can join us for one of our webinars in May or June. Look forward to connecting soon. Thanks, everyone.